It's day 21 of Donald Trump's war in Iran. The conflict is widening and there is uncertainty that is only deepening. But meanwhile, what is India doing? India is stepping up its diplomatic engagement. In the last 24 hours itself, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has spoken to a diverse set of global heads. He spoke to the Amir of Qatar, and he also spoke to King Abdullah II of Jordan. He spoke to the Malaysian Prime Minister. He spoke to French President Emmanuel Macron and also spoke to Sultan of Oman. Now, these conversations span West Asia, span Europe, and also span Southeast Asia regions that are directly impacted by the conflict's ripple effects. So from energy security to also geopolitical stability, India is maintaining open channels with multiple stakeholders. Now, the Modi government is engaging both traditional partners and also regional actors. And India is also ensuring that its interests, particularly when it comes to energy security and also the safety of diaspora, remains safeguarded. We heard the briefing that just took place, in which it was also highlighted that the focus of this conversation was about energy security. The Prime Minister has raised concerns over how energy infrastructure is now getting targeted in the war. Rishabh is with us. Rishabh, the Prime Minister has been engaging global leaders, and this is since the start of the war. But last night itself, there were about 5 conversations that took place where the focus was on energy security and how there are strikes that are currently targeting oil infrastructure and energy infrastructure in the Gulf. What more details can you share with our viewers?
Well, here we need to understand one more thing, that India is not securing energy only for itself. Countries like Bhutan, Bangladesh, Maldives, Sri Lanka, Nepal are also dependent on India for their own energy security. And when a Prime Minister speaks to these leaders, he speaks for South Asia. And that's the reason that the Prime Minister speaking to Jordan or Oman, or for that matter Saudi Arabia or UAE, is something that becomes very, very important. On the backdrop of Eid, calls have happened between India and Malaysia, or for that matter India, Jordan, India, Oman as well. But the major concern that was on the call was the energy security. Remember, the world is reeling under an unprecedented crisis of fuel and energy. Gas, natural gases, crude oil, all are right now under strain because of this conflict. And we heard Indian envoy at the Maritime organization, Vikram Doraiswamy, as well, and he was very clear that free navigation is something that should not stop. And now that Strait of Hormuz has become the tug of war between West and Iran, it is very, very important that India speak to the stakeholders to ensure that it's not only their energy security, but the countries that are dependent on India, their energy security is also taken into consideration. So the diplomacy is something that India wants to move forward with. India does not want to get involved in this crisis militarily, and that's why we haven't seen any statement coming in from Navy or Coast Guard for that matter, but the statements are coming in from MEA because diplomacy is something that India wants to move ahead with.
Absolutely. And let's also tell our viewers about what the focus of these talks have been. The MEA just held, the MEA also said that in these conversations with global leaders, 5 global leaders, the Prime Minister laid emphasis on how it is absolutely important currently to ensure safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz, and also raised concerns over how there are constant attacks now on energy infrastructure. Listen in.
Prime Minister has spoken to 5 world leaders yesterday. He spoke to leaders of Oman, Malaysia, France, Jordan, and Qatar. In these conversations, Prime Minister put forth India's position on the ongoing conflict in West Asia. He highlighted the need to prioritize dialogue and diplomacy for de-escalation and the subsequent restoration of peace and stability. Prime Minister strongly condemned attacks on energy infrastructure. Prime Minister and the various leaders reiterated their support for safe and free navigation through the Strait of Hormuz.
Now, the most immediate and dangerous fallout of the war is now unfolding at sea. Commercial shipping lanes are under attack. Seafarers are also caught in the crossfire. And one of the world's most critical energy arteries, the Strait of Hormuz, is under severe stress. Now, India too has made its stand clear. At the meeting of the International Maritime Organization, India's permanent representative and High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, Vikram Doraiswamy, called attacks on commercial shipping unacceptable. He also flagged serious risks to crew safety, also spoke about navigation and global energy supply chains.
Targeting of commercial shipping and attacks on civilian maritime infrastructure is unacceptable. Such attacks have resulted in the loss of innocent lives, injuries, and heightened risks, including to seafarers. We remain deeply concerned about the safety and welfare of all seafarers. An estimated 23,000 Indian seafarers have been impacted by the current crisis. At present, 24 Indian-flagged vessels are operating the Persian Gulf region, including 22 vessels west of the Strait of Hormuz, with 611 Indian seafarers on board, and 2 vessels east of the Strait of Hormuz, with 47 seafarers on board. All vessels and crew are being closely monitored for their safety and security.
Now, the scale of the Hormuz crisis is also concerning. Over 20 confirmed maritime incidents since early March. Vessel traffic has also collapsed from 138 ships a day to just a handful. Hundreds of Indian seafarers remain stranded in the very region. There are 24 Indian-flagged vessels that are currently in the Gulf, and majority of them are stuck west of Hormuz with over 600 Indians on board. So diplomatic efforts are also underway to secure their safe passage. These are efforts that are underway.
India is among the top 3 seafarer supplying nations, contributing approximately 13% of global seafaring workforce. We remain deeply concerned about the safety and welfare of all seafarers. An estimated 23,000 Indian seafarers have been impacted by the current crisis. At present, 24 Indian-flagged vessels are operating the Persian Gulf region, including 22 vessels west of the Strait of Hormuz, with 611 Indian seafarers on board, and 2 vessels east of the Strait of Hormuz, with 47 seafarers on board. All vessels and crew are being closely monitored for their safety and security. India's energy security and trade are critically dependent on the safe and unimpeded passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Any disruption, obstruction, or closures of these vital waterways have direct consequences for India's economy and for global energy and humanitarian supply chain. We note with grave concern the grave risk of marine pollution arising from attacks on commercial vessels in these waters.
Rishabh continues to stay with us. Rishabh, since the start of the war, can you give our viewers an overview of the kind of diplomatic efforts that India is undertaking and how they are yielding results?
Well, see, if we talk about India and its diplomatic efforts since day one, 21 days, it is 3 weeks of this war which is still ongoing. External Affairs Minister has spoken to almost every counterpart of his in the West Asia, also with his counterparts in Europe as well. Prime Minister himself have dialed at least 5 leaders in last 24 hours. He has spoken to as many leaders in past as well in 21 days, including the President of Iran, Pezeshkian, last week. And India is very clear that this crisis needs to end. The hostilities need to end. Dialogue and diplomacy is the way forward. This is something that India's base of diplomatic conversations with all these leaders have been. Now the major question is that this crisis has not only curtailed the region but also countries far wide in the world, and that is something that is worrisome. If the energy crisis happens worldwide, the supply chain of energy is broken, then it becomes a problem. Countries like India, which is one of the top importers of crude oil and natural gases, if it gets blocked, it will be a problem for countries like India and the countries that are dependent on India. So Vikram Doraiswamy, while he was speaking at the Maritime Organization, he also made it very clear that free navigation is something that needs to be upheld and should be safeguarded. He was talking about the Strait of Hormuz. Apart from that, the unsanctioning of Russian oil or the planning to unsanction Iranian oil is is also something that countries like India has pushed for. In case of Russia, India has in a way got a relief, but when it comes to Iranian oil or the oil that comes in from Qatar, UAE, Oman, Bahrain, to India, that is a big problem. And India's major priority right now is to secure the energy supply and to have it continued. You know, today at the press conference as well, the officials from various ministries did stress upon that the impact of this crisis is now being felt by countries like India as well. Right. Only just a few hours ago, we heard that the premium petrol prices across the OMCs have been increased by 2.35 rupees per litre. Though as of now, the normal petrol or normal diesel has not been increased, but the LPG cylinders have been made expensive. The commercial LPG cylinders
signals that the OMCs are sending by, hiking the price of premium fuel. But before that, there's more.